What would you do if you saw your dead daughter's eyes staring back at you from the face of a homeless child? For millionaire Jack Monroe, this impossible moment at a Minneapolis traffic light shatters the fragile peace he's built after losing his family in a devastating fire 11 years ago. As Jack and his girlfriend Chloe desperately search for answers about the mysterious girl with the burned doll, a doll that should have been buried in his daughter's casket, they uncover a web of lies so dark and twisted that it will leave you questioning everything. Why was DNA testing declined after the fire? Who is the scarred woman hiding the homeless child? And what secrets did Jack's wife take to her grave? This heart-wrenching story of a father's undying love will keep you on the edge of your seat until the final shocking revelation. Follow our channel for more incredible true stories that will leave you breathless. Like and comment where you're watching from, and prepare for a journey that will make you hold your loved ones a little tighter tonight. The rain fell in a steady rhythm against the windshield of the black Bentley, creating hypnotic patterns that matched the melancholy in Jack Monroe's heart. Minneapolis in late autumn was all gray skies and fallen leaves plastered to wet sidewalks. The wealthy man sat in the back seat, absently twirling the wedding band he no longer wore on his finger, watching the city blur through the rain-streaked window. "Dinner was lovely," said Chloe Bennett beside him, her voice warm but tinged with that careful tone people use when they're trying to navigate someone else's grief. 3 months into their relationship, and she was still walking on eggshells around certain subjects, Jack offered a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The chef at Bellezza always outdoes himself. At 45, Jack Monroe had everything money could buy. The real estate empire he'd built from scratch, the 12-bedroom mansion overlooking Lake Minnetonka, the private jet, the fleet of luxury cars, everything except what mattered. The gold band caught the light as he twisted it between his fingers, a nervous habit he couldn't break even 11 years after the fire. The traffic light ahead turned red, and their driver eased the Bentley to a stop at the intersection of Washington and Hennepin. Jack checked his phone. 3 missed calls from his executive assistant about the Vancouver deal. He'd return them tomorrow. Tonight, he just wanted silence. "Jack?" Chloe's voice suddenly cut through his thoughts, but something in her tone made him look up sharply. Her perfectly manicured hand was pressed against the window, her face drained of color. "Jack, look at that little girl." He followed her gaze reluctantly. Across the street, huddled against the brick wall of an abandoned department store, sat a small figure, a child, maybe 7 or 8, her thin frame drowning in a tattered jacket several sizes too large. Homeless children weren't uncommon in downtown Minneapolis, especially as winter approached and shelters filled to capacity. Jack had donated millions to children's charities over the years, but seeing them in person always reopened wounds he preferred to keep buried. "We should help her," Chloe said, already reaching for her purse. "The foundation has programs for," Jack began, but the words died in his throat as the child looked up. Even through the rain and the distance, those eyes, a rare, luminous gray that seemed to glow against her dirt-smudged face, pierced through him like a blade of ice. The same unusual shade as Emily's, his daughter's eyes. "That's," he whispered, unable to finish the thought. The child shifted position, revealing what she held in her small hands. A doll. Not just any doll, but one with a singed blue dress, its plastic face partially melted on one side. A doll that should have been buried in a small coffin 11 years ago. "Jack." Chloe's voice shook as she gripped his arm so tightly her nails dug through his expensive suit jacket. "That girl, she has the same eyes as Emily, the exact same eyes." The name hung in the air between them like a ghost. Emily. His daughter who had died in the fire that took both her and his wife. The daughter whose ashes were interred in the family mausoleum, along with her favorite doll that Jack had placed in the casket himself, unable to bear the sight of it in the empty nursery. "It's not possible," Jack murmured, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. That can't be the same doll." The traffic light turned green, but Jack couldn't tear his eyes away from the child. She looked nothing like his Emily. This girl was painfully thin, her dark hair matted and tangled where Emily's had been golden and curled. But those eyes... "Stop the car," he said suddenly, his voice hardly recognizable. "Sir?" the driver questioned, already pulling away from the intersection. "Stop the car!" Jack shouted, causing both the driver and Chloe to jump. The Bentley screeched to a halt, drawing angry honks from the vehicles behind them. Jack fumbled with the door handle, a man possessed. Rain pelted his face as he stumbled out into the street, ignoring the blaring horns and Chloe's voice calling after him. His expensive Italian shoes splashed through puddles as he ran back toward the intersection, his heart pounding in his ears. But when he reached the spot where the girl had been sitting, there was nothing. Just empty wrappers, a soggy cardboard sign, and rainwater pooling in the cracks of the concrete. The child with Emily's eyes was gone. "Sir, you can't just run into traffic like that." His driver had followed him, holding an umbrella over Jack's now drenched form. "Are you all right?" Jack stared at the empty space, his mind racing. Had he imagined it? Was grief finally driving him to hallucinations after all these years? "There was a girl," he said hoarsely. "A little girl with a doll." The driver scanned the area. "There's no one here, sir." Chloe appeared beside them, her designer heels navigating the wet sidewalk with practiced grace. "She must have run when she saw you coming," she said, her voice oddly strained. "But Jack, I saw her too. And that doll." Jack knelt down, his hand trembling as he touched the wet concrete where the child had been sitting. Something caught his eye. A small object, half hidden in the seam where the building met the sidewalk. With shaking fingers, he picked it up. A single button, small and blue with a tiny flower pattern. The exact match to those on the dress of Emily's doll, the doll that should have been reduced to ashes in a fire 11 years ago. "Emily died in that fire," Jack whispered, more to himself than to Chloe as he stared at the button in his palm. "I identified her myself." "Then how do you explain that doll?" Chloe asked, her voice barely audible over the rain. "The same doll you said you buried with her?" Jack closed his fist around the button, feeling its edges dig into his palm. His mind flashed back to that terrible night, the screams, the heat of the flames, the firefighter holding him back as he tried to run into the burning nursery. The quiet hospital corridor afterward, where he'd been asked to identify the small, charred remains. He remembered nodding numbly, unable to look for more than a second. They'd never found Nora, the nanny. Her body wasn't among the ruins. "Find her," Jack said, rising to his feet with newfound determination, rain streaming down his face and mixing with what might have been tears. "Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, find that girl." As they walked back to the car, neither of them noticed the small figure watching from the shadows of a nearby alley, clutching the damaged doll to her chest. The girl's gray eyes, Emily's eyes, followed the Bentley as it pulled away, her expression unreadable. She whispered something to the doll, something that sounded like a promise, before disappearing deeper into the maze of Minneapolis's forgotten streets. The morning sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jack Monroe's mansion did nothing to warm the chill that had settled in his bones. He stood in his cavernous living room, whiskey tumbler in hand despite the early hour, staring at the small blue button resting on the glass coffee table before him. Outside, gardeners tended to the sprawling grounds, oblivious to the storm raging inside their employer's mind. "It's a coincidence," Jack muttered to himself, for what must have been the 100th time since the previous night. A cruel coincidence, nothing more. But even as the words left his lips, he knew he didn't believe them. He'd spent the night tossing in his king-sized bed, his dreams haunted by gray eyes and the smell of smoke. 11 years had passed since the fire that took his wife and daughter, yet in the span of a single moment at that traffic light, all his carefully constructed composure had crumbled. The chime of the doorbell pulled him from his thoughts. Setting down his untouched whiskey, Jack walked through the marble foyer, waving off his housekeeper who appeared from the kitchen. Chloe stood on his doorstep, her face drawn with worry beneath her perfectly applied makeup. She held a manila folder in her manicured hands. "I couldn't sleep," she said without preamble, stepping past him into the house. I've been making calls all night." Jack followed her back to the living room, watching as she spread the contents of the folder across the coffee table next to the button. Photographs, newspaper clippings, printed emails. "I contacted every homeless shelter in Minneapolis," Chloe explained, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "No one's seen a girl matching her description. Then I had an idea." She held up a photograph, a professional portrait of a smiling Emily from before the fire. His daughter's gray eyes stared back at him, sending a jolt of pain through his chest. "I had my assistant digitally alter this," Chloe continued, laying down another image. This one showed the same face but aged forward, thinner, with darker hair. If Emily had survived somehow, if she'd been living on the streets, this is what she might look like now. Jack's throat constricted. "Chloe, stop. Emily died in that fire. I identified her remains. This is cruel." "Is it?" Chloe challenged, her voice gentle but firm. "Then explain the doll, Jack. Explain how a homeless girl ended up with the exact same doll you buried with your daughter." Jack sank into the leather sofa, burying his face in his hands. "It can't be the same doll. It's impossible." "What made Emily's doll unique?" Chloe pressed. "Was there anything special about it? Anything that would make it absolutely identifiable?" Jack was silent for a long moment, lost in memories he'd tried for years to suppress. "The dress," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "My wife made it herself. She embroidered a small yellow flower on the shoulder, a daisy. Emily loved daisies." Chloe nodded slowly, then pulled out her phone, swiping through photos until she found what she was looking for. She handed it to Jack. "I went back there this morning to where we saw the girl. She was gone, but I found this in a nearby alley." The photo showed a dirty blue fabric scrap caught on a chain-link fence. Even through the grime, the small embroidered yellow daisy was unmistakable. Jack's hands trembled so violently he nearly dropped the phone. "This doesn't prove anything," he whispered. But doubt had already taken root. "I need to go back there," Chloe said, gathering her materials. "I'm going to find her." "Wait." Jack grabbed her wrist. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care so much?" Something flickered across Chloe's face, an emotion Jack couldn't quite identify. "Because I see how much you're still hurting," she said softly. "And because I lost someone too once. I know what it's like to live with questions." After Chloe left, Jack found himself drawn to a room he hadn't entered in 11 years. The door to his home office's storage closet was always locked, the key hidden in his desk drawer. Inside, cardboard boxes held the remnants of his previous life. His wife's belongings, Emily's toys, photo albums he couldn't bear to look at, but couldn't bring himself to discard. With shaking hands, he lifted the lid from a box labeled Fire Report. The official investigation had ruled it an accident, faulty wiring in the nursery wall, but one detail had always nagged at him: the bodies found in the debris. His wife had been identified through dental records. Emily, just 4 years old, had been identified by what exactly? Jack pored over the report, scanning each page with growing confusion. There it was, in clinical detached language. Remains of a female child, presumed to be Emily Monroe, identified by personal effects recovered at the scene. Personal effects, not dental records, not DNA, just the charred remains of a child's clothing and the melted plastic of a doll. And nowhere in the report was there any mention of genetic testing. A cold weight settled in Jack's stomach. Had he been so consumed by grief that he'd failed to ask the most basic questions? Had he simply accepted what he was told, because the alternative was too painful to contemplate? The shrill ring of his cell phone cut through his thoughts. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. "I found her," she said without greeting, her voice tense with excitement. "The girl with the doll. She's at St. Catherine's Park near the east entrance. I'm watching her right now." Jack was already on his feet, grabbing his keys. "Don't approach her, don't scare her off, I'm on my way." He drove himself for the first time in years. breaking speed limits as he crossed the city to the sprawling public park that bordered the Mississippi River. His mind raced faster than his car. If the girl had Emily's doll, the real doll, not just a similar one, where had she gotten it? Had she somehow found it in the rubble of the fire? Had someone given it to her? Or was the impossible true? Could this child somehow be his daughter? Jack spotted Chloe on a bench near the park's eastern gates, pretending to read a book while covertly watching a small figure hunched by the duck pond. He parked haphazardly and approached Chloe with his heart hammering against his ribs. "She's been feeding the ducks for 20 minutes, Chloe whispered as he sat beside her. "Same clothes as yesterday. The doll is in her backpack. I saw her put it away when an older couple walked by." Jack stared at the child, trying to see his daughter in her thin frame and wary posture. The girl couldn't be older than 8 or 9, too young to be Emily, who would be 15 now if she had survived. Yet something about her tugged at his memory. "I'm going to talk to her," he decided, standing up. "Carefully," Chloe warned. "She looks ready to bolt at the slightest threat." Jack approached slowly, trying to appear non-threatening. The girl's head snapped up as he drew near, those haunting gray eyes widening with recognition and fear. "Hello," Jack said gently, stopping several feet away. "I saw you yesterday. You were downtown, by Washington Avenue." The girl said nothing, but her small hands clenched into fists. "That's a special doll you have," Jack continued, his voice threatening to break. "May I see it?" The girl's expression hardened. "My mother told me never to talk to rich people," she said in a small, clear voice that sent shivers down Jack's spine. Before he could respond, she snatched up her worn backpack and darted away, disappearing into the trees with the speed and agility of someone accustomed to running. "I don't understand why you won't go to the police with this," Chloe said, pacing the length of Jack's study 3 days after their encounter with the girl in the park. Rain lashed against the windows, casting moving shadows across the antique Persian rug. A homeless child is living on the streets of Minneapolis. That alone warrants intervention. Jack sat behind his mahogany desk, staring at the business card between his fingers. Maxwell Bennett, private investigator. Former FBI. Discreet. "The police would ask questions I'm not ready to answer," he replied, his voice hollow. "Questions about why I'm so interested in this particular child. Questions about Emily." The weight of those questions had kept him awake for 3 straight nights. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the girl's face, those unmistakable gray eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, his wife's eyes, Emily's eyes, staring back at him with a mixture of fear and something else. Recognition? Accusation? "Then hire someone who doesn't need to ask questions," Chloe suggested, nodding at the card in his hand. "Max is the best. When my sister disappeared 2 years ago, he found her when the police couldn't." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You never mentioned a sister." A shadow crossed Chloe's face. "Some wounds are too painful to talk about, even now." She took a deep breath. "The point is, Max can find this girl without involving authorities. He can get answers about the doll." Jack turned the card over in his hand once more before reaching for his phone. The decision had been made the moment he saw those gray eyes at the traffic light. He needed answers, regardless of where they might lead. Maxwell Bennett arrived 40 minutes later, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the watchful eyes of someone who had seen the darkest corners of humanity. He listened silently as Jack explained the situation, his weathered face betraying no emotion, even when Jack mentioned his suspicions about Emily's death. "Let me get this straight," Bennett said when Jack finished, his voice carrying a slight Texas drawl. "You believe this homeless child might be connected to your daughter's death 11 years ago because she has similar eyes and a doll that resembles one you buried with your child?" Put that way, it sounded absurd. Jack flushed. "I know how it sounds. I've heard crazier theories that turned out to be true," Bennett replied evenly. "Show me everything you have." Jack spread the fire investigation report across his desk. Bennett leaned forward, his reading glasses perched on the edge of his nose as he carefully examined each page. "This is incomplete," he said after several minutes. "There should be lab reports, DNA confirmation. That's what's bothering me, Jack admitted. I was in shock after the fire. Elizabeth and Emily were everything to me. I signed whatever papers they put in front of me. I never questioned. His voice broke. I never asked for proof. Bennett's eyes narrowed as he flipped to a specific page. Says here DNA testing was declined by the family to avoid further trauma. That your signature? Jack stared at the form, at the scrawled signature at the bottom that vaguely resembled his own. I don't remember signing this. I don't remember anyone asking about DNA testing. Who handled the arrangements? Lawyer? Family member? My brother-in-law, Marcus, Elizabeth's brother. He was trying to help. Jack frowned, a new thought forming. Marcus was at the hospital before I arrived. He identified Elizabeth. Bennett made a note in his small black notebook. I'll need to speak with him. He moved to Europe years ago. We haven't spoken since. Jack trailed off, the implications of what he was saying suddenly hitting him like a physical blow. Could Marcus have been involved in some way? The thought was too terrible to contemplate. One more thing, Bennett said, pointing to another section of the report. The nanny, Nora Whitley, was never found. Her apartment was cleared out the day after the fire, Jack replied. Police assumed she fled out of guilt, that maybe she'd been negligent somehow. But Nora loved Emily. She'd been with us since Emily was born. Bennett closed the file with a decisive snap. I'll find the girl first. Then we'll work backwards. DNA test will tell us if she's related to you. And if she isn't? Jack asked, his chest tight. Then we find out how she got that doll. Bennett answered simply. Either way, there's a story here that someone doesn't want told. After Bennett left, Jack found himself drawn once again to the boxes of Emily's things. He'd preserved her room exactly as it had been before the fire. The rebuilt wing of the mansion contained a perfect replica, down to the shade of pink on the walls, the stuffed animals arranged on the bed. But he never went in there. The housekeeper kept it dusted, but the door remained locked, the room a shrine to a life cut short. The boxes in his office were different. These contained the few items salvaged from the original house, photo albums mostly, some jewelry that had been in the safe, documents that had been stored elsewhere. And one item Jack had never been able to look at, the backup copy of the home security footage from the day of the fire. His hands trembled as he inserted the old flash drive into his laptop. The security system had been state-of-the-art for 2013, cameras at every entrance, motion sensors throughout the house. The fire had destroyed the main server, but the system automatically backed up to cloud storage daily. Jack had downloaded the footage once, before deleting the cloud account, along with all other painful reminders. The video files were organized by camera location. Jack clicked on front door and scrolled to the timestamp from just before the fire started. The footage showed Elizabeth leaving the house at 3:42 p.m., her face streaked with tears, Emily clutched in her arms. The child was still in her pajamas despite the afternoon hour, her face buried in her mother's neck. Elizabeth carried nothing else, no purse, no suitcase, just her daughter. Where had she been going? Jack had always assumed Elizabeth and Emily had been trapped in the nursery when the fire started, but this footage told a different story. They had left the house. And then, what? Come back? Why? Jack fast-forwarded through the footage. At 4:17 p.m., Nora the nanny exited through the same door carrying a small suitcase, her face a mask of determination. At 4:32 p.m., Elizabeth returned, alone. No Emily. She was still in the house when the fire started at 5:08 p.m., according to the timestamp. Where was Emily during that missing time? Where had Elizabeth taken her? The office phone rang, startling Jack from his thoughts. Bennett's gruff voice came through the speaker. Monroe, I found something at the hospital. You need to see this. An hour later, Jack stared at the document Bennett had obtained from a reluctant hospital administrator. The medical examiner's preliminary report on the child's remains recovered from the fire, a report that had never been included in the official investigation. Initial examination suggests subject is female, approximately 4 to 5 years of age. Jack read aloud, his voice shaking. Severe thermal injuries present. Identification tentative based on location and associated personal effects. Keep reading, Bennett urged. However, Jack continued, anomalous dental development noted. Subject's dentition inconsistent with records provided for Emily Monroe. Recommend full DNA panel to confirm identity before final determination. Jack looked up, meeting Bennett's steady gaze. Someone knew, he whispered. Someone knew it might not be Emily, and they buried the report. The DNA test that you supposedly declined would have confirmed it, Bennett said quietly. The question is, who wanted to make sure that test was never conducted and why? A commotion from the foyer interrupted them. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. Jack's security chief appeared at the study door, his face grim. Sir, it's Ms. Bennett. She says she's found the girl. The abandoned warehouse district near the Mississippi River was a labyrinth of crumbling brick buildings and forgotten industrial spaces. As Jack's Audi navigated the pothole-riddled streets, the skyscrapers of downtown Minneapolis loomed in the rearview mirror like a different world entirely. Rain continued to fall, drumming against the car roof and transforming the broken pavement into a series of muddy puddles. She lives here? Jack asked, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. Bennett sat beside him in the passenger seat, his experienced eyes scanning their surroundings. According to Chloe, yes. In that building up ahead. Bennett pointed to a former textile mill, its windows either boarded up or shattered, graffiti covering most of the lower facade. She followed the girl here yesterday but lost her inside. Came back today and waited. The girl returned with an older woman. Jack parked behind Chloe's Mercedes, which looked painfully out of place in these surroundings. His mind was still reeling from the hospital report Bennett had uncovered. If the body in the fire hadn't been Emily, then whose was it? And if Emily hadn't died that day, where had she been for 11 years? They found Chloe huddled in the shelter of a loading dock, her designer raincoat pulled tight against the chill. Her face lit up when she saw them approaching. She's still inside, she said, gesturing toward a rusted side door that hung slightly ajar. I saw her go in about 20 minutes ago with an older woman, 60s, maybe 70s, with burn scars on the right side of her face. They had groceries. You did good work, Bennett said approvingly. But from here on, you should let me handle this. We don't know what we're walking into. No, Jack cut in, his voice firm. I need to see for myself. Bennett's weathered face creased with concern. Monroe, if that child is your daughter, which is still a massive if, she won't know you. She won't remember you. You can't just walk in there expecting a reunion. But Jack was already moving toward the door, drawn by a force stronger than reason. 11 years of grief and guilt propelled him forward, through the rain, across the cracked concrete, to the threshold of a truth he both craved and feared. The door opened into a dim corridor that smelled of mildew and something else. The faint scent of cooking. Soft light spilled from beneath a door at the far end, along with the murmur of voices. Jack moved cautiously, aware of Bennett and Chloe following close behind, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. As they neared the door, the voices became clearer. A child's high, clear tone and the slower, raspier speech of an older woman. Jack hesitated, his hand inches from the door, his heart thundering in his chest. What right did he have to intrude on this child's life? What if Bennett was right and she had no idea who he was? But the need to know was too powerful. He knocked. The voices inside immediately fell silent. Footsteps approached, and the door opened a crack. A single gray eye, so achingly familiar, peered out, widening with recognition and alarm. You followed me, the girl accused, her small voice edged with fear. Before Jack could respond, the door was pushed wider, revealing an elderly woman with severe burn scars covering the right side of her face and neck. Her left hand gestured rapidly in what Jack recognized as sign language, while her right remained motionless at her side. She wants to know who you are and what you want, the girl translated, though the woman hadn't spoken aloud. "My name is Jack Monroe," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. I think I might know something about your doll." The woman's unburned features hardened into a mask of suspicion. Her hands moved in another flurry of signs. "Grandma says you should go away," the girl said. But her eyes, those gray eyes that matched his wife's, his daughter's, remained fixed on Jack's face with an intensity that belied her young age. "Please," Jack said softly. "I've been looking for that doll for a very long time." Something in his tone must have reached the woman. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped back, opening the door wider to reveal a surprisingly well-kept living space. What had once been an industrial office had been transformed into a makeshift apartment, with partitions creating separate rooms, second-hand furniture arranged with care, and strings of fairy lights casting a warm glow over the worn but clean surroundings. "My name is Maxwell Bennett," the investigator introduced himself as they entered, showing his credentials. "I'm helping Mr. Monroe locate someone who's been missing for many years." The woman's gaze darted between them, her expression guarded. She signed again, more slowly this time. "Grandma wants to know if you're here to take me away," the girl translated, a tremor in her voice. "No," Jack assured her quickly. "I just want to talk, to understand." The girl turned to a shelf above a small electric heater, where the doll sat propped against the wall. Up close, Jack could see the damage more clearly. The left side of the doll's face partially melted, one arm missing, the blue dress stained and singed. But the yellow daisy embroidered on the shoulder was unmistakable. Elizabeth's handiwork. "Where did you get this doll?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl glanced at the old woman, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Grandma gave it to me. She said it belonged to another little girl who needed someone to take care of it for a while." Jack felt the room tilt around him. He steadied himself against the wall, aware of Chloe's hand on his arm, offering silent support. "This other little girl," he managed to ask, "do you know her name?" The elderly woman's burned features contorted with emotion. Her hands began to move, but instead of signing to the child, she reached for a notepad on a nearby table and wrote in shaky block letters, "Not here." Bennett stepped forward, his manner gentle but firm. "Ma'am, we need to understand what happened. If you know something about Emily Monroe." The woman's reaction was immediate and violent. She knocked the notepad to the floor, her unburned features twisted in a combination of fear and rage. She signed frantically to the girl, who backed away, clutching the doll to her chest. "Grandma says you have to leave now," the child said, her voice trembling. "She says it's not safe." Jack took a step toward the woman, his desperation overriding caution. "Please, if you know what happened to my daughter." The woman's hands stilled. She stared at Jack, her eyes widening with a new emotion. Recognition. She pointed at him, then made a rocking motion with her arms, followed by another series of signs. "She wants to know if you're Emily's father," the girl translated, confusion evident in her tone. "Yes," Jack whispered, his voice breaking. "Yes, I am." The old woman seemed to deflate, sinking into a nearby chair. She covered her face with her good hand, her shoulders shaking in silent sobs. Bennett knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "Ma'am, are you Nora Whitley? Were you the Monroe's nanny?" The woman looked up, tears streaming down her scarred face. She nodded once, a barely perceptible movement. "Grandma can't hear you," the girl said. She lost her hearing in the accident that burned her face. As this revelation washed over him, Jack noticed a photograph on the wall behind Nora. It showed a house. His house, before the fire. The one he'd shared with Elizabeth and Emily, the one that had burned to the ground 11 years ago. "How do you have this?" he demanded, his voice rising despite himself. "Why do you have a picture of my house?" The girl flinched at his tone, moving closer to Nora for protection. The old woman's face hardened again. She reached for the notepad, scribbled something, and thrust it toward Jack. "She is not your daughter." Jack felt as though he'd been struck. "I never said she was," he replied, his voice hollow. I'm looking for Emily. Nora wrote again, her hand trembling so badly the letters were barely legible. Emily is gone. Leave us alone. Gone where? Jack pressed, desperation making his voice crack. Dead? Alive? What happened that day, Nora? Where did Elizabeth take Emily before the fire? The tension in the small room was palpable. The girl looked between Jack and Nora, clearly frightened by the intensity of their exchange. Chloe stepped forward, placing herself between Jack and the child in a subtly protective gesture. Maybe we should continue this conversation another time, she suggested gently. We've upset them enough for one day. But Jack couldn't walk away now, not when answers seemed so tantalizingly close. Please, he said to Nora, forcing himself to speak calmly. I need to know what happened to my daughter. Nora stared at him for a long moment, her scarred face unreadable. Finally, she turned to the girl and signed something. Grandma says you should check the attic of your house, the child translated. She says the truth is in the letter. The attic of Jack's mansion had remained undisturbed for over a decade, a dusty time capsule of memories too painful to revisit. As he climbed the narrow staircase that led to the uppermost floor, the wooden steps creaked beneath his weight, a haunting soundtrack to his ascent into the past. The air grew thicker with each step, heavy with dust and the lingering scent of cedar. I haven't been up here since we rebuilt after the fire, Jack explained to Bennett, who followed close behind. Chloe had remained at Nora's makeshift apartment, hoping to gain the old woman's trust. Elizabeth used to store keepsakes here, family heirlooms, seasonal decorations, old letters. The attic stretched the entire length of the mansion's east wing, its pitched ceiling creating shadows that danced in the beam of Jack's flashlight. Cobwebs draped the exposed rafters like tattered lace, and stacks of cardboard boxes formed a maze in the cavernous space. Each box was meticulously labeled in Elizabeth's elegant handwriting: Christmas ornaments, summer clothes, wedding memories. What exactly are we looking for? Bennett asked, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket to cover his nose against the dust. A letter, Jack replied, moving deeper into the attic. Nora said the truth is in the letter. But which letter? There must be hundreds stored in these boxes, years of correspondence carefully preserved by his methodical wife. Elizabeth had been a believer in handwritten notes in an increasingly digital world, saving everything from birthday cards to thank-you notes. Jack moved toward the far corner where a large steamer trunk sat beneath a small circular window. The trunk had belonged to Elizabeth's grandmother, a family heirloom she'd cherished. If Elizabeth had hidden something important, something she didn't want him to find, this would have been the place. The brass lock on the trunk was tarnished with age, but the key still hung from a hook on the inside of the lid, just as Elizabeth had always kept it. Jack's hands trembled as he inserted the key, the lock giving way with a resistant click. The hinges protested as he lifted the heavy lid, releasing the scent of lavender and old paper, Elizabeth's scent. Inside, neatly organized as everything Elizabeth touched had been, were stacks of letters tied with faded ribbons, photo albums from before the digital age, and a collection of small jewelry boxes. Jack lifted out the first bundle of letters, the paper yellowed with age. These were love letters from their courtship, his own younger self pouring his heart onto the page. If Nora was referring to a specific letter, we could be here all night, Bennett observed, scanning the trunk's contents. But Jack's attention had been caught by something else. A small wooden box tucked into the corner of the trunk, its lid inlaid with mother of pearl in a floral pattern. He'd never seen it before, which was strange. He'd thought he knew every possession his wife had owned. The box was locked, but a tiny key was taped to its underside. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a single envelope. It was addressed to Elizabeth in handwriting Jack didn't recognize, postmarked just 3 days before the fire. The return address simply read N.W., Nora Whitley. "This is it," Jack whispered, carefully opening the aged envelope. The letter inside was written on pale blue stationery, the ink slightly smudged in places, as if by tears. "Dear Elizabeth," Jack read aloud, his voice echoing in the dusty attic. "I can no longer keep silent about what I've discovered. The burden is too great, and Emily deserves to know the truth about her birth. Jack paused, his heart hammering against his ribs. Bennett leaned closer, his expression grave. For 7 years I've honored your wishes and kept your secret. But the resemblance grows stronger each day. Emily has begun asking questions about why she doesn't look like Jack, why her eyes are so different. Children are perceptive and she senses something isn't right. The letter trembled in Jack's hands. He felt as if the floor beneath him had suddenly disappeared, leaving him suspended in free fall. I understand your fear, he continued reading, his voice barely above a whisper now. I know why you've kept the truth from both of them. But secrets this big don't stay buried forever. They poison everything they touch. The next section of the letter had been torn away. Deliberately, Jack realized, noticing the clean edge of the tear. Someone had removed the central portion of Nora's letter, leaving only the beginning and the conclusion. Whatever you decide, the letter continued at the bottom of the page. I will support you. My loyalty has always been to you and Emily. But please consider what I've said. The truth, painful as it may be, is better than a lifetime of lies. I'll come by on Thursday to discuss this further. Thursday, the day of the fire. She knew something, Jack said, the letter dropping from his numb fingers. Nora knew something about Emily that Elizabeth wanted to keep hidden from me. Bennett picked up the letter, examining the torn edge. Someone deliberately removed the most crucial part. The question is, was it Elizabeth or someone else? I need to know what was in that missing section, Jack said, a new desperation edging his voice. And I need to know what happened to the nurse who was on duty the night of the fire, the one who would have processed the identification. Bennett's phone rang, the harsh electronic sound jarring in the attic's hushed atmosphere. He glanced at the screen before answering. Bennett. His expression changed as he listened, eyes narrowing. When? Are you sure? Another pause. Keep her there. We're on our way. He ended the call, turning to Jack with renewed urgency. That was Chloe. The little girl mentioned something about her real mother being in a special hospital. Chloe pressed for details, and the girl said it's a place where people go when they forget who they are. With Nora's help, she was able to identify it as Pine Ridge Psychiatric Facility in Rochester. That's less than 2 hours from here, Jack said, already moving toward the attic stairs. There's more, Bennett added, his tone grave. Chloe convinced Nora to show her the girl's birth certificate. Her name is Lily, and she's 8 years old, born exactly 3 years after the fire. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. If this child wasn't Emily, she could still be connected to her in some way. The drive to Rochester passed in tense silence, the countryside blurring outside the car windows as dusk settled over the landscape. Pine Ridge Psychiatric Facility loomed on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling Victorian-era building surrounded by meticulously maintained grounds and a discreet security fence. Bennett's FBI credentials granted them immediate access. The facility director, Dr. Abigail Harris, was a slender woman with prematurely silver hair and the measured speech of someone accustomed to choosing her words with extraordinary care. The patient you're asking about was admitted 7 years ago, she explained, leading them through sterile corridors to her office. She arrived with severe dissociative amnesia following a traumatic event. For the first year, she couldn't tell us her name or anything about her past. But you identified her eventually? Bennett asked, his trained investigator's instincts clearly on high alert. Dr. Harris hesitated. A family member came forward after seeing her photo in our unidentified patients database. She's made significant progress since then, though she still experiences periods of regression. Her name, Jack pressed, his patience worn thin by the day's revelations. What is her name? Miranda Johnston, the doctor replied, though she was admitted as Jane Doe for 37. The name meant nothing to Jack. His disappointment must have shown on his face because Dr. Harris studied him with renewed interest. You believe you know her? She asked. I'm not sure, Jack admitted. but she might have information about my daughter's death or life 11 years ago. Dr. Harris turned to her computer, typing rapidly. Ms. Johnston was a pediatric nurse at Minneapolis General before her breakdown. She worked in the burn unit. She looked up, her expression guarded. Were you a patient there, or was your daughter? My daughter died in a fire, Jack explained, his voice tight. At least that's what I was told. Now I'm not so certain. Understanding dawned in the doctor's eyes. I see. Well, Ms. Johnston is currently in a stable period. I can allow a brief visit, but I must warn you. Her memory is fragmented. She may not be able to give you the answers you're seeking. As they followed Dr. Harris through the facility's east wing, Jack felt a growing sense of dread mingled with desperate hope. The corridors seemed endless, each identical door hiding someone's personal tragedy, someone's broken mind. Finally, they reached a small common room where a woman sat alone by the window, staring out at the gathering darkness. Her hair was prematurely gray like the doctor's, her thin frame draped in a hospital-issued sweater despite the room's warmth. Miranda, Dr. Harris called softly. You have visitors. The woman turned slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. When her gaze fell upon Jack, her eyes widened in recognition and fear. The ceramic mug she held slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor as she pressed herself against the window as far from Jack as possible. You, she whispered, her voice hoarse with disuse or terror. You're him, the father. You've come for her. The shattered ceramic pieces of Miranda Johnston's mug lay scattered across the polished floor of the psychiatric facility's common room, the spilled tea forming a dark puddle that spread slowly toward Jack's feet. No one moved to clean it up. The tension in the room was palpable, hanging heavy in the air like an electrical charge before a lightning strike. Miranda, Dr. Harris said cautiously, her professional demeanor cracking slightly as she stepped between the trembling woman and Jack. These gentlemen just want to ask you a few questions. You're safe here. But Miranda's wide, terrified eyes remained fixed on Jack, as if she were seeing a ghost, or worse, a monster from her nightmares come to life. Her hands clutched the windowsill behind her, knuckles white with strain. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, her voice raspy and broken. She said you'd come eventually, said you'd never stop looking. Jack took a careful step forward, mindful of both the broken ceramic and the woman's fragile state. Who said that, Miranda? My wife? Elizabeth Monroe? At the mention of Elizabeth's name, Miranda's expression shifted, fear giving way to something more complex, a mixture of grief and what almost looked like guilt. The pretty one, she murmured, more to herself than to Jack. With the sad eyes, gray like storm clouds. A jolt went through Jack at the description. Elizabeth's eyes, Emily's eyes, the same unusual shade of gray that had caught his attention in the homeless child's face at that traffic light. Miranda, Bennett interjected gently, using the calm, authoritative tone that had likely served him well during FBI interrogations. We're trying to understand what happened 11 years ago, during the Monroe house fire. You were working at Minneapolis General that night, weren't you? In the pediatric burn unit. Miranda's gaze shifted to Bennett, her breathing slightly less erratic as she focused on this new person who wasn't Jack. She nodded almost imperceptibly. There was a little girl brought in, Bennett continued, severely burned. Do you remember her? A tear slipped down Miranda's hollow cheek. The quiet one. She didn't cry, not even once. Burns over 60% of her body, no chance. Jack felt his knees weaken. He sank into a nearby chair, the room suddenly spinning around him. The clinical description of his daughter's supposed injuries he'd never allowed himself to visualize, hit him like a physical blow. But that wasn't Emily Monroe, was it? Bennett pressed, watching Miranda's face carefully. The woman's eyes darted around the room as if searching for escape routes or hidden observers. Her fingers twisted the hem of her sweater compulsively. I don't know names, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. We weren't supposed to use names. Just the child in room 4. That's what they told us. Who told you? Jack demanded, unable to contain himself any longer. Who gave those orders? Dr. Harris placed a warning hand on Jack's shoulder. Mr. Monroe, please. Miranda is fragile. If you upset her too much, I'll have to end this visit. Bennett shot Jack a look that clearly advised restraint before turning back to Miranda. The hospital records show that DNA testing was declined for the child's remains. Do you remember anything about that? Miranda's eyes clouded, her gaze turning inward as she searched through the fractured landscape of her memories. The form, she said slowly. The man with the fancy watch brought the form. Said the family was too devastated that identifying her would just be cruel. Her voice took on a sing-song quality, as if reciting a line she'd rehearsed. Spare them this additional trauma. That's what he said. What man? Jack leaned forward, keeping his voice deliberately gentle despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. Miranda, was it Marcus Winters, my brother-in-law? Something shifted in Miranda's expression, a flash of recognition quickly suppressed. I don't know names, she repeated, but there was a new tension in her voice that suggested otherwise. The child who died, Bennett continued, his tone conversational, as if they were discussing something of no particular importance. Was she the same age as Emily Monroe? Younger, Miranda replied automatically, then immediately pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes widening in horror at what she'd revealed. How much younger? Bennett asked. I can't. Miranda's breathing quickened, her chest rising and falling rapidly as panic set in. You need to leave, please. She'll be angry if I talk to you. Who will be angry, Miranda? Jack asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. Elizabeth? Nora? Who are you afraid of? But Miranda was slipping away from them, retreating into whatever safe mental space she'd created to shield herself from the memories that had broken her. Her eyes grew vacant, her rocking more pronounced. She was crying, Miranda whispered, seemingly to no one. The little one who lived, crying for her mother. But they said to be quiet, to give her the medicine to make her sleep. She looked up suddenly, making direct eye contact with Jack for the first time. They switched them, the dead one for the living, and I helped. The admission hung in the air, devastating in its simplicity. Miss Johnston needs to rest now, Dr. Harris intervened, signaling to a nurse who had appeared in the doorway. This has been too stimulating. As the nurse led Miranda away, the woman turned back once more, her face suddenly clear and present in a way it hadn't been before. Check the anonymous patient records from that night, she said, her voice stronger. Case like E447M. That's where they hit her. The drive back to Minneapolis was silent, both men lost in their own thoughts as the Minnesota countryside rolled past in darkness. Jack stared out the window, seeing not the occasional lights of farmhouses but the reflection of his own haggard face in the glass. What kind of father had he been, to accept the death of his child without demanding absolute proof? What kind of husband had he been, to miss whatever desperation had driven Elizabeth to such extremes? The hospital administrator was waiting for them when they arrived, alerted by Bennett's call from the road. Dr. Matthews was a nervous man with thinning hair and the perpetually harried expression of someone who managed too many crises with too few resources. He led them through the quiet corridors of the hospital's administrative section, the late hour ensuring they encountered few staff members. This is highly irregular, he muttered as he unlocked his office door. Patient records are confidential, even anonymous ones. A child may have been abducted and another child's death covered up, Bennett replied bluntly. I think that warrants bending a few rules. Dr. Matthews sighed as he settled behind his computer. What was the case number again? E447M, Jack supplied. The alphanumeric code burned into his memory. The administrator's fingers moved across the keyboard, each click echoing in the silent office. After what seemed an eternity, he frowned at the screen. That's odd, he said, adjusting his glasses. The file exists, but it's been digitally redacted. Almost all the information has been removed. Can you tell anything about the patient? Bennett asked, moving around the desk to look over the administrator's shoulder. Female, approximately 4 years old at time of admission, Dr. Matthews read. Treated for smoke inhalation and first-degree burns to the hands and arms. Admitted at 5:47 p.m. on November 12, 2013. He looked up at Jack. The night of your house fire. Jack's heart pounded so loudly he was certain the others could hear it. What else? The administrator scrolled through the sparse file. The patient was discharged to the care of... He stopped, frowning at the screen. This is strange. The guardian's name has been completely erased, but there's a note that proper identification was verified by... He squinted at the screen. The signature is electronic, but it appears to be M. Winters. Marcus, Jack breathed, the confirmation of his brother-in-law's involvement landing like a blow. Where was the child taken? Dr. Matthews shook his head. That information is gone too. But there's one more thing. He pointed to a notation at the bottom of the file. The child's medical expenses were paid in full by something called the Willow Trust. Bennett immediately pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. The Willow Trust was established in 2013, he reported after a moment. A private foundation based in Vermont, dedicated to supporting children with traumatic backgrounds. He looked up, his expression grim. The founding trustee was Marcus Winters. Dawn broke over Minneapolis, painting the sky in watercolor strokes of pink and gold that Jack Monroe observed with unseeing eyes from the floor-to-ceiling windows of his home office. He hadn't slept. The revelations of the past 24 hours circled in his mind like vultures, picking apart everything he'd believed about the last 11 years of his life. The Willow Trust. Marcus Winters. A child discharged from the hospital the night of the fire. A child who, according to all evidence, could only have been Emily. His Emily, who he had believed was dead and buried all these years. On his desk lay the fragments they'd assembled. Nora's torn letter, the hospital records, photographs of the girl called Lily with her haunting gray eyes, and a grainy printout of the Willow Trust's incorporation documents that Bennett had managed to obtain overnight. The puzzle was taking shape, but crucial pieces were still missing. I've got something, Chloe announced, entering the office with her tablet in hand. She'd spent the night at a hotel near Nora's makeshift apartment, keeping watch and building rapport with the old woman and the child. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her expression was animated with purpose. Nora finally opened up a bit. She wrote some things down. She placed her tablet on the desk, displaying a photo of a handwritten note in the same shaky script they'd seen before. I was there that day. Elizabeth came to my apartment with Emily. She was afraid. Said Jack would take Emily away if he knew the truth. Jack's breath caught in his throat. What truth? That Emily wasn't my biological daughter? The possibility had haunted him since they'd discovered Nora's letter in the attic, its central section conspicuously missing. Why would she think I'd care about that? I loved Emily more than anything in this world. Keep reading, Chloe said quietly. Elizabeth went back to get Emily's things. I was supposed to meet her later. But then the fire. Marcus came instead, said Elizabeth was dead, said I had to disappear with Emily or he would tell police I started the fire. Jack's hands began to shake. Marcus threatened Nora? Why would he do that? Bennett, who had been silently studying the documents spread across the desk, looked up. Follow the money, he said grimly. After Elizabeth died, who controlled the Monroe family trust that she inherited from her parents? Marcus was the co-trustee, Jack replied slowly, the implications dawning on him. If Emily was declared dead too, then according to Elizabeth's will, everything would go to Marcus. But if Emily was alive, then she would inherit everything when she turned 18, Bennett finished. Roughly $50 million according to the financial disclosures I found. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture so dark and twisted that Jack could barely comprehend it. His brother-in-law, the man who had comforted him after the fire, who had handled all the funeral arrangements, who had encouraged Jack to identify Emily's remains quickly to spare himself further pain, had orchestrated it all for money. But that doesn't explain why Elizabeth was afraid I'd take Emily away, Jack said, the hurt evident in his voice. Or why she felt she needed to run from me in the first place. Chloe hesitated, swiping to the next photo on her tablet. Nora wrote more. It's difficult, Jack. The night before, Elizabeth found something on Jack's computer. Photographs. Horrible things involving children. She was terrified, thought Emily wasn't safe. The blood drained from Jack's face. That's a lie, he whispered. I would never. We know, Bennett cut in firmly. This is clearly part of the setup. Someone planted those images on your computer to give Elizabeth a reason to run. My guess? Marcus. How would he even access my computer? Jack demanded. He was at your house often, wasn't he? Bennett asked. As Elizabeth's brother, as a family friend, he could have installed remote access software at any time. Jack sank into his chair, overwhelmed by the methodical cruelty of it all. Marcus had manipulated Elizabeth into fearing her own husband, had likely orchestrated the fire that killed her, had threatened Nora into disappearing with Emily, and had maintained the deception for 11 years, all for Elizabeth's inheritance. What happened to Emily after Nora took her? Jack asked, his voice hollow. Chloe swiped to a final photo. This is where it gets complicated. Marcus found us 2 years later, said he would kill Emily if I didn't give her up. I had no choice. He took her. Later I heard she was with a family in Vermont. I've been searching ever since. Vermont, Bennett murmured, where the Willow Trust is based. But who is Lily then? Jack asked, confusion evident in his voice. If she's not Emily, why does she have the doll? Why does she look so much like Elizabeth? A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications of the question settled around them. It was Chloe who finally broke it, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I know, she said, not meeting Jack's eyes. But we need to confirm it. She turned to Bennett. Can you get DNA tests done? Quickly and discreetly. Bennett nodded grimly. I still have contacts at the Bureau's forensic lab. If we can get samples from Jack and the girl... And you, Jack added suddenly, looking at Chloe with dawning realization. We need your DNA too. Chloe's face paled, but she nodded. Yes, mine too. The revelation Jack had been subconsciously circling crystallized in that moment. Chloe's inexplicable involvement in the search for Emily, her immediate recognition of the girl's eyes at the traffic light, her determination to uncover the truth. It all made terrible sense now. You're Elizabeth's daughter too, aren't you? He asked quietly. From before we met. Tears welled in Chloe's eyes. Half-sister, she corrected softly. We had different fathers. Elizabeth gave me up for adoption when she was 16. I found her when I turned 18, but she asked me to keep my existence a secret from you. She was afraid it would change how you saw her. So you sought me out after the fire, Jack said, the betrayal cutting deep. You got close to me to find out what happened to your sister. At first, yes, Chloe admitted, a tear spilling down her cheek. But then I got to know you, and I realized you couldn't have been the monster Marcus painted you as. I saw how much you still loved Emily, how broken you were by her loss. I was going to tell you everything, but then we saw Lily at that traffic light, and suddenly there was a chance Emily might still be alive. The painful irony wasn't lost on Jack. While he'd been mourning a daughter who might not be dead, he'd unwittingly grown close to his wife's secret firstborn, a daughter Elizabeth had never told him about. If Lily isn't Emily, Bennett said carefully, breaking the tense silence, but she has Elizabeth's eyes and Emily's doll, then she's my daughter too, Chloe finished, her voice breaking. My daughter with Marcus Winters. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with devastating clarity. Marcus had not only stolen Emily and orchestrated Elizabeth's death, he had manipulated and used Elizabeth's firstborn daughter as well, fathering a child with her who was now living on the streets with Nora, the only person who knew the full truth. Jack stared out the window at the morning sky, now fully bright with daylight. Somewhere out there was Emily, his Emily, living a life apart from him, based on an elaborate web of lies. And here in his own home was the niece he'd never known he had, the daughter of the man who had destroyed his family. I need to see her, he said finally, rising from his chair with newfound determination. The real Emily. My daughter. Vermont in early winter was a postcard come to life. Rolling hills dusted with the first snow of the season, colonial houses with smoke curling from chimneys, maple trees stripped bare but still majestic against the pale blue sky. Under different circumstances, Jack might have appreciated the picturesque beauty of the Green Mountain State. Instead, as Bennett's rented SUV wound through the countryside outside Burlington, his attention was fixed solely on the address programmed into the GPS. Willow Creek Academy, a private boarding school for exceptional young women, according to its website. And according to the information Bennett had extracted from the Willow Trust's financial records, the current residence of a 15-year-old student named Emma Winters, Marcus's supposed niece, who had enrolled 5 years earlier. The timing matches, Bennett had explained during their flight from Minneapolis. Emma Winters appeared in Vermont shortly after Nora says Marcus took Emily from her. The trust pays her tuition, her medical expenses, everything. Now, as they approached the school's wrought iron gates, Jack felt a strange mixture of hope and terror. What if this girl wasn't Emily? What if she was, but wanted nothing to do with the father she'd been taught to fear? What if Marcus had poisoned her mind against him so thoroughly that she would refuse to even speak with him? Remember the plan, Bennett cautioned as they pulled into the visitor parking area. I'm a potential donor to the school. You're my financial advisor. We're here for a tour. Jack nodded mechanically, his eyes scanning the grounds. The campus resembled a small New England college. Ivy-covered brick buildings, manicured lawns, young women in uniform moving between classes with books clutched to their chests. His daughter, if she was indeed here, had grown up in this rarefied environment, worlds away from the life they'd begun together in Minneapolis. The school's headmistress, Dr. Eleanor Prescott, greeted them in the main administration building with the practiced warmth of someone accustomed to courting wealthy benefactors. She was a tall, elegant woman with silver hair swept into a perfect chignon, her New England accent as crisp as her navy blue suit. The Willow Trust has been one of our most generous supporters, she explained, as she led them through gleaming hallways adorned with student artwork. Several of our scholarship students are trust beneficiaries, including Marcus Winters' niece, Emma. Such a talented girl, our star pupil in both mathematics and music. Jack's heart lurched at the mention of music. Emily had shown extraordinary musical aptitude even at 4 years old, able to pick out melodies on the piano by ear after hearing them just once. Elizabeth had joked that they had a prodigy on their hands. We'd love to see some of your music program facilities, Bennett said smoothly. Perhaps when students are practicing? Mr. Monroe's foundation has a particular interest in arts education. Dr. Prescott beamed. What perfect timing. Our advanced piano students have studio time right now. Follow me to the arts building. They crossed a courtyard where golden leaves skittered across the stone path, the air crisp with the scent of approaching snow. Jack moved as if in a dream, each step bringing him potentially closer to the daughter he'd thought lost forever. The music building was a modern addition to the historic campus, all glass and polished wood. As they entered, the sound of a piano, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major Jack recognized, drifted from one of the practice rooms. Dr. Prescott led them toward the sound, pride evident in her bearing. That's Emma now, she said, gesturing toward a room with a glass observation panel in the door. She's preparing for the state competition next month. We expect her to place first, as she did last year. Jack stepped forward, his legs suddenly unsteady beneath him. Through the glass, he could see a teenage girl seated at a grand piano, her slender fingers moving across the keys with confident precision. Her hair was different, a rich chestnut brown rather than the blonde of her childhood. But as she turned slightly to check her sheet music, Jack caught a glimpse of her profile. Elizabeth's profile. Emily's profile. Something must have shown on his face because Dr. Prescott looked at him curiously. Are you all right, Mr. Monroe? You've gone quite pale. Just moved by the music, Jack managed to reply, his voice hardly more than a whisper. She plays beautifully. Indeed she does. Shall we continue our tour? The science facilities are just across the quad. As they turned to leave, the music stopped abruptly. The door to the practice room opened and the girl stepped out, clutching her sheet music. She froze when she saw the visitors. Her gray eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, Emily's eyes, widening in what Jack initially mistook for typical teenage awkwardness at encountering strangers. Then he realized she was staring directly at him, her face draining of color. "Emma, dear," Dr. Prescott said, oblivious to the sudden tension. "These gentlemen are considering a donation to our music program. This is Mr. Bennett and his colleague, Mr. Monroe." At the mention of his name, the girl took an involuntary step backward, her sheet music slipping from her fingers and scattering across the polished floor. "Monroe?" she repeated, her voice small and strained. "Jack Monroe," he confirmed gently, fighting the urge to reach for her, to pull her into his arms and never let go again. "From Minneapolis." Something flickered in those gray eyes, recognition, fear, confusion. Before anyone could say another word, she turned and fled, her footsteps echoing down the corridor as she ran. Dr. Prescott stared after her in astonishment. How extraordinary. Emma is usually so poised, I can't imagine what's gotten into her. "If you'll excuse me," Jack said, already moving to follow. "I dropped something in the courtyard. I'll catch up with you." He found her behind the arts building, huddled on a stone bench beneath a barren maple tree, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if for protection. She looked up as he approached, her face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. "You're him, aren't you?" she said, her voice stronger now with an edge of defiance that reminded Jack powerfully of Elizabeth. "You're the man in the photographs, the man who wanted to hurt me." Jack stopped several feet away, respecting her space, his heart breaking anew at the confirmation of Marcus's manipulation. "Is that what your uncle told you?" he asked carefully. "He showed me the pictures," she replied, a tremor in her voice betraying her uncertainty. "From your computer, the ones that made Mom so afraid she had to take me away." "Those pictures were planted," Jack said quietly, "by your uncle. The same man who orchestrated the fire that killed your mother, who stole you from Nora, who created an elaborate fiction about my being a danger to you, all to get his hands on your mother's inheritance." The girl's eyes widened, disbelief and confusion warring on her face. "No," she whispered. "Uncle Marcus saved me. He's taken care of me all these years." "Has he?" Jack asked gently. "Or has he kept you isolated, controlled every aspect of your life, never allowed you to ask questions about your past? About the father you barely remember?" Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the foundation of lies she'd been raised on. "I have dreams sometimes," she admitted hesitantly. "About a big house with a swing set in the backyard, and a man who carries me on his shoulders." Her voice faltered. "But Uncle Marcus said those are just fantasies. That my father died when I was a baby." "Your father is alive, Emily," Jack said, using her real name for the first time, his voice breaking. "He's been looking for you for 11 years. He never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping somehow, against all odds, that you were still out there somewhere." Tears welled in her gray eyes. "My name is Emma," she insisted, but with less conviction than before. "Your name," Jack said gently, "is Emily Elizabeth Monroe. You were born on April 17, 2009, at Abbott Northwestern Hospital in Minneapolis. Your first word was duck. You refused to eat anything green until you were 3. You had a stuffed giraffe named Mr. Longneck that you couldn't sleep without, and you had a blue doll with a daisy embroidered on its dress, a doll your mother made for you." Each detail landed like a pebble dropped into still water, sending ripples of recognition across her face. "How do you know about the doll?" she whispered. "Because I've seen it," Jack replied. "It's with a little girl named Lily, your niece, though she doesn't know it, the daughter of your half-sister, Chloe." "I have a sister?" Confusion and wonder mingled in her voice. "You have a family," Jack corrected softly. "A real one, not the fiction Marcus created to keep you under his control." She stood abruptly, wrapping her arms more tightly around herself. "I need proof," she said, her chin lifting in a gesture so reminiscent of Elizabeth that it took Jack's breath away. Not just stories anyone could make up. Jack reached slowly into his pocket and withdrew a small photograph, worn around the edges from years of handling. It showed a beaming Elizabeth holding a toddler Emily, both of them with the same striking gray eyes, the same delicate features. In the background was Jack, his arm around his wife's shoulders, looking at his family with undisguised adoration. Emily, or Emma as she still thought of herself, took the photo with trembling fingers. She stared at it for a long moment, her breathing shallow. "I remember this," she whispered, so quietly Jack almost didn't hear her. "I remember the red dress, and the necklace Mom is wearing, the heart-shaped one. It was her grandmother's," Jack said. "She wore it every day." "Uncle Marcus has it," she said, still staring at the photo. "He said it was a family heirloom that would be mine someday." A piece of Elizabeth that Marcus had kept for himself, another small cruelty among so many larger ones. "Emily," Jack said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you need time. But there's something you should see. Something that might help you understand what was taken from both of us. Sometimes the most profound truths emerge from the ashes of our greatest losses. Jack Monroe's journey reminds us that love transcends time, distance, and even the most elaborate deceptions. What would you do if everything you believed about your past was suddenly called into question? Would you have the courage to face painful truths, to rebuild what was broken, to forgive what seems unforgivable? Family isn't always defined by blood or biology, but by the connections we choose to honor. In a world where appearances can deceive and motives can remain hidden for years, perhaps the most powerful act is simply believing in someone when all evidence suggests you shouldn't. Jack never stopped looking for his daughter, even when her death seemed certain. Chloe chose to protect a sister she barely knew. And little Lily, innocent in all of this, carried the one object that would eventually bring a shattered family back together. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of redemption, courage, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all. Let us know in the comments what you would have done in Jack's position. And remember, sometimes hope is found in the most unlikely places and the most broken paths can lead us home.